Good morning. Everybody smile, it'll brighten up the room. So, yeah, or not.
Well, when you meet with somebody who tries to disenfranchise you, you probably don't have a lot to smile
I'm glad we have
about.
an opportunity for a meeting today undercover. When I woke up early this morning, I heard the rolling thunder going through. I thought, well, my soybeans will be perking up a bit with the lightning going on, but it may make this a little bit dark. But appreciate the fact we can have the opportunity. And Tuesday we're opening up in the state, so that'll be a good thing. And we can go back indoors and have those meetings. It's been too long. We've been locked down. It's about time to open up, especially since we've seen other states do it very well, thank you, and get along well. This morning, we want to make sure we have plenty of time for a question, answer, comment that goes on. But I thought I'd bring an update from what's taken place. Just got home from D.C. last night. We had a number of things that I think I'm certainly proud of taking place. The Gregorio Sablan of Northern Marianas and I reintroduced this week legislation we've introduced before and have gotten through the House, but sometimes we can't get it through the Senate because of lack of time. Hopefully this time we will. We've talked with the new Secretary of Labor about the issue. It's a bill that will give encouragement to the Department of Labor to train their people on how to spot human trafficking. It's in epidemic proportions, especially with what's coming across the border now.
I'm more worried about
Cartels
insurrection
that are
and insurrection
an opportunity
supporters.
Excuse me.
I'm
just
speaking to my
ruin
congressman.
people's lives
It's in the
in many
Constitution.
ways.
He's got pocket constitutions
So we
right
got-
there. It is
Right.
a constitutional right.
We want to hear about human trafficking.
You want to hear about nonsense and deflection from
let's-
the insurrection
let's try
he
to work
supported
together on
and
this.
and supported and incited
Knock
with the
it off.
president
Let's
to
try
overthrow the government of the United
Knock it
States.
off.
Bill,
You tried to overthrow the government of the United States.
worst
You're a
thing you can do-
traitor and
worst
an
thing you
oath
can
breaker
do
and
is
a
respond to
liar.
this guy. He will
A
go on
liar and an oath
the entire
breaker.
time he will go on like this.
Yes, I
So
will.
the rest of us, we can talk
Yeah,
about
that
the
was a
issues.
comedy show with it.
Yeah. So
Yeah, there's nothing funny
it
about
is
overthrowing the
it is
government.
the thing that he does, and even his supporters don't like it. So let's not worry about Bill. He'll have it all videoed, and then he'll selectively edit it. So
Don't
people can
selectively
see
edit
what they need.
anything. You're a liar
Anyway,
and an
human
oath breaker.
trafficking is at epidemic proportions. This bill was put out. Hopefully we can catch it because we've got people coming across now, not only at the border, but have come through on planes thinking they're going to a spot. I know my Democrat colleague and friend, good friend, Gregorio, we've worked together on this issue for years. In the Northern Marianas, people are brought there thinking they're going to be working in the tourism industry in a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And they end up being captives for years in human traffic endeavors, including prostitution, sweatshops, and the rest. We're taking action on that because now we see what's coming across the border. People, one in every 3 female, we're talking about little girls on up to adult women, have been human trafficked and have been sexually assaulted. It's epidemic, it's a humanitarian crisis. So that bill was introduced, it's moving forward. Another bill that passed that I was glad to be on as the sponsor and prime co-sponsor with my good friend from Chicago, Bobby Rush, is a bill that sets in place a cabinet-level position in the Department of Energy for cybersecurity. Basically a cybersecurity czar. With what we saw go on a few weeks back with Colonial Pipeline, the hacking that went on from some Russian actors, that's something the President should have talked about aggressively. In fact, should have said, we don't meet unless there are some things
That's
that you
funny.
need to.
Trump didn't do anything while they ransacked
So the,
our cybersecurity
the time
infrastructure.
went
They
on,
attacked us and they did nothing.
Without talking about that, but go ahead, don't worry about it. He's going to do what he's going to do. Cybersecurity issue is something we have to attack. It's a bill that Bobby and I have introduced before. Again, got through the House, got through the committee this past week. We believe it'll get through the House and the Senate. Plenty of time for them to take it up, and with the push now going to have energy secured, from cyber attacks, we should get that through as well. So those are a couple things. I just read, and this will bring up to date on some of the things that are going on of our great concern, and ought to be concern of all Americans. When you see the New York Times doing an article this past week, New York Times, saying there is an economic crisis with rising prices, overly generous unemployment benefits, a national security crisis, a border security crisis with its attendant homeland security crisis, humanitarian crisis, and public health crisis, and a separate energy crisis. Those are the statements from the New York Times about what's going on, and definitely what is a concern to me, and I think a concern to a lot of us. There are crises hitting all over. We've got to do something about it. When you look at the national security crisis, President Biden's summit this past week, not only with Putin, but with the G7, with NATO, a lot of things were missed. When you stop and think about the fact that an agreement was made, led by our president, to give a waiver on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, giving opportunity to Russia to be a provider of energy at the concern of Europe, the majority of European nations, except for Germany, who's a member of NATO and should not have been in relation with Russia. And there was no pushback on it. In fact, our president opened up that pipeline to be completed and shut down Keystone pipeline here in the United States. There's about 11,000 union jobs that were lost.
That's a lie.
And last week, the company producing Keystone Pipeline said, we're done. It's over.
Hooray, hooray.
So when we continue to see the energy crisis that's developing even at the pump, 56% increase in the cost of your
Cybersecurity, Russian attack, President Trump did nothing.
Is causing us to pay more for our living expenses. That's a concern that's going to go on. The crime crisis.
Yeah, I know. When are they going to arrest you for sedition?
And the crime crisis.
Supporting an insurrection is a crime.
2 children were shot in Detroit. A 2-year-old's dead. In Jackson, I was just on an interview with a Jackson radio station. It pointed out 80 police calls have taken place this week. 4 shootings in the city of Jackson.
Maybe tax cuts will
We can
fix it.
go on with those things. And yet when you have a total disregard for law enforcement.
Like the
and
Capitol
funding the
Police? Like the
and
Capitol
all of
Police that were
has
assaulted
an
doing their
impact on
job?
the rest of us. And the safety and security of our nation is at impact. The border crisis.
Fox News crisis?
674% increase in border encounters with our law enforcement officers. 674% increase since last May. Third straight month of 170,000 apprehensions. That hasn't occurred since 2000. And many of those that have been caught are now released on planes and shipped all over the United States, including in the Michigan, with no COVID test, no vaccine given.
We took the stranger in?
And
Oh
that's
my
the
goodness.
concern.
Did we feed the stranger?
Did
Did
we
we
have
provide them with
pizzas?
shelter?
Oh
my
The
gosh.
crisis comes.
What will the
when
Lord
we-
think of
we
us for
violate
helping
the
those
law,
people?
And we don't have a country now that people come to that they know there's justice.
That's for
Under
sure.
the Constitution
Thanks to
and the
you.
law.
Insurrection and overthrowing the government and no
Economic
accountability
crisis that
and no
goes on.
consequences.
7.6
I'm going to speak when I want to speak.
7.6
This is redress of
million
grievances
jobs
against somebody
from
who tried to
pre-pandemic
overthrow the
levels.
government of the United
Labor
States.
force participation
He's an oath
rate
breaker and a
declined
traitor.
61.6% in May. That's the steepest decline that we've had in 50 years. Now these are all stats of a crisis that's developing in the United States. The question is, what are we going to do about it?
question
Had-
is, why is it happening?
Had we done simply nothing, with the new administration stepping in, with the economy rebounding even amidst the pandemic, the only thing that slowed us down, strongest economy before COVID hit in 50 years, unemployment rates for African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, the lowest in history.
I guess disbanding that
All of
pandemic
that-
response
all
team
of
was a
that
big
going
mistake,
on.
huh?
Manufacturing, China was on the ropes. They knew it. It's
The
interesting
farmers
that a
around here were
Wuhan
being
virus
subsidized
comes
with
at
billions
that
of dollars
time
because of a
and shuts us
failed
down.
trade war.
Had you had the opportunity to just keep things going as they were,
Tax
When
cuts
you
for the
come
rich.
out
The
of
billionaires not paying
and we
anything in
can move on.
taxes.
So it is amazing that we've seen a step back to policies that didn't work before, whether it's Republican or Democrat administrations. Why go back to that when we found policies that worked and was benefiting people with jobs and opportunities?
I guess except for those
and the middle class was
600,000
growing.
dead from COVID from a
So
mismanaged
having
crisis.
said
huh?
all of that, we have $6 trillion that we've spent on COVID. It appears that they want to spend more. An additional on the budget, which the president's put forward, and thankfully, not even Democrats are going to support that. But talking about another $6 trillion for that expenditure, plus another $2 trillion on infrastructure. And I'm glad this past week Joe Manchin and others have brought some sanity back, and it looks like now we're down below $600 billion for an infrastructure deal package. Hopefully it'll get to the place where the House Republicans put forward a $460 billion. That's still a lot of money.
You guys are going to put a proposal
But that's-
forward?
that's-
Like the American with
the
Disabilities
proposal is
Act?
before it, Bill. You should have read about that
pardon?
already.
ACA?
We put it forward.
Yeah. How about that repeal replacement?
Okay, let's go to questions, and I see a hand back there.
Affordable Care Act replacement?
Thank you very much. My question is about broadband as part of the infrastructure bill. I believe that you were part of that broadband for everyone going through in the rural countries, parts of the country as well. And so, as part of the infrastructure bill, do you agree that having widespread broadband should be part of the bill?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we've spoken up clearly on that there ought to be infrastructure, roads, bridges, waterways. And we have a major port in our district, the Port of Monroe. You think of all the other ports in Michigan, on the Great Lakes, that ought to be a part of it. Of course, air transportation. But then when you're building new roads or digging up old roads and bridges, let's make sure we put the underlayment in as well, the pipes that are necessary. We have all sorts of lead issues that we can deal with in infrastructure. And we can put in fiber and cable necessary for internet capabilities. We've made it very clear in legislation that I've co-sponsored on broadband that number one, we follow the new maps which we mandated to be built by the FEC, not the old maps that said, for instance, Lenawee County was fully covered with broadband internet capabilities because you had it in certain areas. Most of the county wasn't. The same way with Washtenaw County. Sure, around Ann Arbor, but Manchester, Dexter, you don't have it. So the new maps are taking that into consideration. And we're also saying, let's go not to underserved initially, but go to unserved first. Get that done. Then take care of the underserved, and then build out the rest that have it already.
Because I live in part of Adrian here where the cable company said it's not feasible economically for them to give us cable. We're on Tipton Highway, and it ends at the ISD, and it ends at Highway 50. All of us there on the rest of Tipton can't get cable. So what are they going to do about that?
Again, to expand the capabilities through investment in an infrastructure package that reduces the cost for the providers, who then can't say, as they said to you and they've said to me for many years up until just recently, that we need more people living out near you. You live in the country. They got to Lock Erin because there were a lot of people living there, but they couldn't get much further. Well, finally, once we did away with the net neutrality legislation. It opened up opportunity for investments. And we saw it take place all over my district. Dexter and other places are getting it that didn't have it before, Tecumseh, and I think eventually you will as well. But that's why we're pushing for the unserved areas first, as opposed to fixing up the underserved or rebuilding some that have it already.
Because it affects education.
Oh, yeah.
School children
Yeah.
had to be issued iPads in order to do their work, and then a lot of them just didn't have cable available where they were living, and that really hurts the education of the children.
Yeah.
I was talking to
Tim's-
School Boards
the people that pay
Association
10
yesterday,
money
and they were
are
saying
against
about the fact that
spending
school
money on
buses
getting you cable.
that they would send out with MiFis on it, so kids and their parents could drive near those buses. That shouldn't be the case. And I guess the silver lining, one of the silver linings coming from the COVID crisis was the fact that we've learned that getting online can be very effective and helpful. I mean, our students don't want to hear that no longer will there be a rational reason for a snow day necessarily, because we can do online now. And some businesses can carry on just fine with Zoom meetings and the like. Some of the travel isn't necessary, the costs will be reduced. People can choose more where they want to live. If it works for their business, they can move out to beautiful places like this, for instance, instead of having to be near a city operation, for instance. So we've learned that, and little by little we're going to get it, but that should be part of the infrastructure package. And I think that's an agreement that's bipartisan. It's the other areas.
Comcast pays
that we're
both
putting
sides.
into it.
Comcast pays both sides.
Yes?
You mentioned before that the power flows from the states to the federal government, correct?
It should.
And the
Constitutionally, it should.
Yeah, and the state legislatures have control over their state elections. Is that?
They should. The Constitution says they do.
And then in November, you talked about brokering a meeting with the state legislative leaders and Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. That happened on November 20th.
I talked about brokering a meeting.
Yeah, it's at Delaney in the morning. You called the radio show and you mentioned you had several conversations with the president, and you said you mentioned I suggested a set of names to the president.
Oh, yeah.
And okay.
Yeah, the president asked me, are there any people in your state that I ought to talk to?
That are going to find some votes?
So I gave him the legislative leadership. Guys like Mike Shirkey.
Find some
And
votes.
what was that? What were you hoping would happen tonight?
Cheat on the election.
It wasn't what I was hoping was happening, what the president was hoping would happen.
Cheat on the election.
That the president could talk to legislative leaders about what was going on in Michigan, which was unconstitutional and illegal, and see what they were thinking of doing. And then they had the meeting. I wasn't at that meeting.
Why
Get some
was
votes.
The president's business, like how the state elections were run.
It was his election. Why wouldn't you worry about whether your election is honest and full of integrity? Why wouldn't you worry about that?
If there was no evidence.
No, I'm asking him.
Yeah, no evidence, so you don't worry about it.
I'm asking.
Manufactured evidence like
Actually,
Tim
I'm
King's
asking
lawsuit that the judge is
I
going
don't
to
think
spank
you're
him
a
on?
ventriloquist, are you?
Actually, I was asking, it's not my business to answer your question.
No, it is your business, because I'm saying, why shouldn't he be worried about the integrity of the election, and why shouldn't he be able to talk to the most important people in the state of
So you
Michigan?
had a series of conversations with him over weeks, you mentioned, and what were those conversations like?
I don't even know fully what you're talking about. I talked to him about his request for what names he should talk to of legislative leaders in Michigan. Is that wrong?
Yes.
And they were staying in the Trump International Hotel.
I don't know where they stayed. I wasn't with them.
Well, there's photographs.
Well, then talk to them about it.
And, well, so you didn't participate in any of those meetings while...
I didn't participate in any of those meetings.
And you never stopped and met with the state legislature while they were in D.C.?
I wasn't in D.C. when they met with him.
Okay, and then, why were they private? Like, because the public was never really...
I have a lot of private meetings in Washington. Shouldn't I?
And even like when reporters were trying to ask Mike Shirkey, like, what was that meeting about? You just like barrel ahead.
Ask Mike Shirkey.
So, I mean, you mentioned those names. Like, does Donald Trump need you to mention those names? Like, what? Like, why?
Ask Donald Trump.
Can you let us in on like what those conversations were like in that time, like leading up to that meeting?
What conversations?
You said, the president called me, and we've had a
He
couple
called me.
conversations about the need to make sure that our legislative team is on the same page of understanding what is actually taking place.
I think I just answered your question.
You said
You're
we've had
reading it to us.
a couple conversations.
Yeah. I've had more conversations with the president.
Can you let us in on that, though?
No.
What about transparency?
Why transparency?
You're not being transparent.
I'm to tell you everything I talk about with anybody, including the president?
Yeah.
Hopefully, when you're
No, we don't
under
do that.
oath in court,
Last
We don't
that
do
will
that.
be
Last
something,
question.
and you can say you plead the
We
fifth.
don't do that.
So-
There are private conversations that you have. If you had a private conversation with me, would you want me to release it to the media?
I'm
The
a
answer
private
is-
person, not a...
No. I'm not a private person.
No, you are a public person.
And if I had
You
a
need to be
conversation with you,
transparent.
should I release
private.
it to the press?
No, because I'm a
Is the
private
president a private person? No, not
I
at the
don't
time. He
have
was a
to
public
release,
person. You don't
there is
have
no
to.
requirement.
We understand why you don't want to talk
There is
about
no
it.
release, there is no requirement.
We understand.
Joe Biden wouldn't release all of his,
Sure he wouldn't. It's fine.
his information that he had with Putin.
We know you're not going to tell us more about
We get
sedition.
back to yours.
It's
So,
fine.
on January 6th, you called the Guy Gordon Show, and you said, I've spent several hours talking to some of our state legislatures in the last 24 hours. Again, this is January 6th. Literally talking with them for that period of time about what I want to see them doing. It's their responsibility, their authority to control the elections, and if they're unwilling to do it, we've got to push them. And that was, as I told the other day, that's my main purpose. We've got to push them.
What's wrong with that? I'm a citizen. Mike Shirkey is a senator who I know very well. I talk with other legislators who are my legislators personally. I'm a citizen. I'm a constituent of theirs. I would tell you to push your legislators as well. If you feel they need to do something, push them.
But the power flows from the state legislators to DC.
Absolutely, and I was trying to make them do their job.
You're a United States congressman, and so you've got like more leverage.
I'm also a resident of Lenawee County.
Do their job to do what? What specifically were you seeking them to do?
To do their job relative to elections and making
And?
sure that Jocelyn Benson,
We had
Did
the
her job.
safest and most secure election on record. Oh, you guys can laugh.
Any more questions?
Fox News tells you something different. I understand that.
let's go over here.
There isn't any evidence, and they're getting slapped and spanked in court.
Let me have the floor.
Go right ahead, sir.
He's just giving you the opportunity.
I listen to it on the phone when you call, and I enjoy being a part of that little circle where everybody gets to call in. And if there is any reason to have to name drop, that's not a good time. But I'm here because of the elections. My kid just turned 18 in 2018, so he went to his first election. I said, before you get into the booth, make sure you do your homework, okay? And that's your business. That's your business. That's private. However you vote, that's up to you. You keep it to yourself. I don't need to know. But that's your business. 2020, I asked him if he's going to go to the presidential election. He says yes. So he's already voted twice. He's been able to vote now. He's of age, and he's voted both times. What I'm having a problem with is that if this election official or that election official or that election official or this election official is not an official, where are they getting these numbers from that this precinct has this many registered voters and the number that came in is way over the top? I'm not a genius, but I can do the numbers. There's only this many registered voters, and this is happening. Can you help me with that? Because I can't explain that to him. He's only been voting twice, so.
Yeah.
That's.
I think that's the reason why there was such upheaval in this last election. None of us here, could I see a show of hands, how many want us to have another contested election like the last one?
Nobody does.
Nobody.
Anybody put your hand up and say we want another one like that? None of us do. Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
The Republicans
It
are
shouldn't be
working
that
to
way.
create the framework for more.
It shouldn't be that way.
In decades.
You believe that?
It's the truth.
Okay, well, let me say, ma'am, this is our town hall, not yours only, okay?
Wow, that's pretty
He
rude.
asked a question,
Wow, that's
legitimate
pretty
question.
rude. Huh.
You feel it was the most honest election ever. There are thousands and thousands of people that don't think
Because you
that.
lied to them.
So the issue
You
is
intentionally
we need
lied
to
to
make
them.
sure
The GOP
that,
and the
we don't
president
have
and
that
Fox News lied
answer-
about the
in answer
election.
to your
It's called the
question and
big
your son's
lie.
question.
It's why I'm here
This
calling
is
you a
why
liar.
we need to make sure that the state legislatures in each state do what's necessary so that we don't have shouting matches like this in the future.
Replace secretaries of state so they can find the votes
So
that you
that we
need.
can have a constitutional election.
We did.
That's all we're
It was
asking.
perfectly constitutional.
And,
Laughed out of court.
Joe Biden won the election fair and square.
Sometimes you just gotta
I
laugh,
need
don't
an
you?
answer. Do you
So
believe Joe Biden
what
is
we're
a
doing
legal
here now, sir,
president?
we're
Do
trying
you
to make
believe
sure
Joe Biden is a
that we
legal
have
president?
each state
Could you answer
responsible
the
for their
question,
elections.
please?
I'm not answering your question until I answer this man's
Joe Biden is
question.
legally our president.
I'm gonna answer this man's
Yeah, well,
question.
you just showed how corrupt you are.
Ma'am,
I don't wanna put anybody on the hot seat. I don't wanna put anybody on the hot seat for any reason. I just feel that if there should be some sort of investigative, whatever you wanna call it, so that there isn't any shouting matches
There were
at
dozens
these
of them.
forums,
Dozens of them.
that we will be able to at least sit together and say, yeah, we can fix
until you're
that.
satisfied or your son's satisfied, I would continue contacting your state
Of course you would say
legislators.
that. You're intentionally undermining support for the
state
democratic
legislators that
institutions
represent you
that are
and
outlined
say,
in the
"What will you be
Constitution.
willing to do?" You have to do that. I don't have that responsibility. You can read the Constitution. Elections
Does
are
the
given
Attorney
to the
General
states.
of Texas have that
And that's the
authority to try to
responsibility.
throw out the electoral votes?
Thank
So
you.
That's what
all
you
I can
tried to
say you.
support.
Thank you.
Yes,
You
Well,
should have
we're
just
gonna
told
answer
this
her
man
question.
that he was lied to.
I have a couple questions. One, would you answer her question?
Yes, thank you,
first?
please.
I think I've answered her question.
No, you
No, you
haven't.
didn't.
Is
You-
Joe
you-
Biden-
you
Do
don't-
you believe Joe Biden is a legal
Okay, let her ask this,
president?
please. What was your question?
Will you say that you believe Joe Biden is legally elected our president?
Joe Biden is legally our president.
Thank you.
That's all I want.
Now, I'm
No
saying
buts.
that, I'm saying that as a resident of Michigan, who I've said publicly, I don't believe Trump won Michigan. Did he lose Michigan by as much as 154,000 votes? I don't think we'll know. But I don't believe he won Michigan. I can't speak for all the other states, some who are running audits right now, some who have significant questions on where ballots went.
Some whose votes
We'll
you
see
tried
what
to throw
happens
out by
there.
voting for
But
throwing
I
them
was
out.
at the inauguration of President Biden. I sat there. I think you would say I honored him with that.
But I hadn't heard you until today.
I've said that many times. He probably has it on tape. Yes, ma'am.
This wasn't even my comment, but I wanted to make sure all that got done. And here's another one that.
I hope they'll let you give your question.
Here's another one that wasn't my question, so I do want to get back to that. You said you contacted various legislators in Michigan. Who all did you contact? Can you remember?
I know each of my state representatives and senators that are in my district, which includes Mike Shirkey, the majority leader in the Senate. I talked with the incoming Speaker of the House, Wentworth, and a number of others.
Also, your reps, like Zoran and Cully, I assume, they're
Yeah,
mine,
yeah,
so I assume
yeah.
they're yours too. And it's so hard for you, isn't it, to be both a citizen and a representative? Because that could look like it was influence on your part.
Doesn't look hard at all. I'm a citizen first.
But they
I
don't
represent you all.
necessarily see that. You know, I'm a human first, but my kids see me as well.
So I shouldn't be able to talk to them?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I was just making a comment about that. Did you talk to, so you only talked as a citizen, and that's why you talked to those people?
Yes.
Okay, so as a legislator, a U.S. legislator, you did not talk to anybody else?
What-
Because this was your concern as a citizen?
What could I do more as a legislator than as a citizen?
Oh, I'm asking who you talked to. Because as a
Other than signing in
legislator,
for other
like I said, I'm mom. I'm a human, but I'm mom, and I'll never stop being mom. You're Mr. Walberg, but you'll never stop until you do stop being our elected representative, too. So when you speak to people, I think it's really hard for my kids to see me as just one of the girls. And I think it's hard for people to see you as just somebody who lives in Lenawee County, especially elected representatives. So what I'm saying is, I wonder if they were so you spoke to them because you were concerned. Were you asking them to do something?
I was.
What were you asking, if I may ask, what were you asking?
I was asking them to make sure that we didn't have another election like 2020.
Okay, and why not talk to other people if you were concerned about that? Like the minority leader, for example.
I have no relationship with the minority leader.
But you're a citizen of Michigan.
Because he's a
I'm not a
hyper-partisan
citizen of
hack.
the minority leader's district.
So it's only because of that.
I went to mine. And remember, I've also been a state representative. I've been in the state legislature.
Right.
You're thinking
Yeah,
that
yeah.
a member of Congress has some power over the state legislature.
Just the mom power. That's the only thing I mean.
We don't.
You can
As a
never
state
be
legislator,
just you.
as a state legislator, I took in many cases with a grain of sand anything that a congressman said to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's just like when one of us call.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think you're assuming people will see you as two different beings in that case.
No,
But that's not my question.
I'm talking about how legislators see each other.
Well, but you get my point, don't you?
Well, I get your
That
point, but I
you're-
disagree with your point.
That you're something more in the eyes of people than just.
Oh, maybe in the eyes of
Mr.
people.
Walberg.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah, that's
But you were talking about the state legislators that I was calling.
right.
And I know how state legislators feel about congressmen.
Yeah.
You had a direct line to the president, like nobody else like really has that.
When they're pushing, trying to find votes.
Oh, and can I say one other thing about that? Isn't it true that there have been lawsuits about the election outcome and they've never gone, I think never gone, 61 of them have never concluded that there was any electoral fraud?
Correct.
Correct.
We've had very few that got to evidentiary hearing.
Have there
And
been
that's
Because they didn't have standing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Have there been more than 50?
I have no idea.
There have.
And you know.
There have, yeah.
All I know is that in the most recent case in Michigan, relative to our Secretary of State and how she used administrative law in asking clerks of this state to do something that was illegal,
Which was what?
which was giving great deal of flexibility and in fact disregarding as necessary signatures on absentee ballots. Judge Christopher Murray ruled that she violated,
Yeah.
and that was the most recent decision
Yeah, no.
in Michigan.
The federal judge called
And
in
I
all the
think we're gonna-
attorneys, including
I think we're
Sidney
gonna
Powell,
see a
about this
lot of
election
other
fraud, and they're going to get
cases that are brought
spanked.
in other states as well. So-
July 6th. Should be a great hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard there's a fourth stimulus in the works for people that owe over $100,000 on their home. Something about they're supposed to get $3,750. That's a joke. If anybody was able to get a loan for that kind of a house, they've got assets, they don't need help. People on Medicare and Medicaid are the people that are broke and need help.
I'm not certain of that. I do know there has been push for more stimulus, whether it be Bernie Sanders or others that are pushing to extend. Even in the area of unemployment insurance stimulus.
Yeah.
We've gone through 600, 400, 300, and now there's talk of continuing it to the end of the year. And in fact, we have employers that can't get people to come back to work.
It's all over the
There's jobs all over.
They might have to raise their wages.
And so the importance is to get it back. There are land rental homeowners that haven't been paid. We gave a waiver for people paying their rent for a period of time, but it's been extended. But the dollars coming in to assist the landlords have not come. And so we've got rental units that are housed with people that aren't paying their bill because the government said
So
they
how,
don't have
yeah,
to.
how's the landlord supposed to
And the
pay his-
landlord, is how do you stay in
his
business?
rent?
So
Yeah.
the issue is
Payment.
to open up the economy. Let's get the government out of the way. Let people get back to work. And sure, some might not get the exact job they want. But many, when you're talking about fast food restaurants that aren't even cooking the food, just making the sandwiches, paying upwards of $18 an hour.
That's not enough to live
That's a
off.
challenge. And
Slave wages would be better.
These people are
Poverty wages are
not
better. Food stamp
homeowners that are
subsidies
providing the resources
for
families.
businesses are better.
These are
Welfare
college
subsidies for
students and others.
Walmart are better.
I think the thing we need to always remember is that socialism sounds interesting until you run out of other people's money. And you can tell somebody.
It's easy to do when you
must
don't
pay
have
that.
taxes on people, then they're not paying their taxes like the
That's the
billionaires
concern.
you go for, right?
ma'am.
You support them.
So let's get past who you've spoken to and who you haven't spoken to and what it was about. And let's move on to education. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work you've been doing for education?
Well, we have some significant concerns. I spent time on a Zoom call with the Michigan Association of School Boards yesterday, and some school board members from my district as well. Their concern is that this has been the roughest 2 years of their students' life, the roughest 2 years of their school's life, and how to carry on something that is required in the Constitution, our state Constitution, and to do it in a way that makes sense. In a hearing in Education and Labor Committee just this past week with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Becerra, in front of us, the fact came out in the testimony that high school students on average have lost a year of education. They can get that back with some remediation. The concern was that the lower grades, specifically 3, 4, 5, who are at the key spot of really inculcating in their learning capabilities how to read, which influences everything else they do, whether it's in STEM or whether it's in well, any type of academic. They've lost 2 years. And will school boards, will teachers, and more importantly, will parents allow, and in certain cases, push for their children to be held back a year in order to get that reading opportunity so they can graduate from high school? Because it's shown statistically, if you don't learn to read by 6th grade, it's highly likely statistically that you won't graduate from high school because you are stunted. We can't let that happen. So I've asked the school boards. They don't have an answer to that yet, but that's something they have to consider for the interest of the kids themselves. Mom, Dad, are you willing to keep Johnny or Susie back? I know you don't like that. They won't like it. But in the long run, it'll benefit them for the future. So those are some things we're talking about. The issue of all of the cost for schools to get, because of COVID, to get the type of air systems in place, the filtering systems in place, that's a huge cost. The technology is a huge cost. And those are things that we've sent literally millions of dollars back to states like Michigan to be used, and sadly a lot of that has not got to the local district yet. There are still education dollars housed in Lansing that have not been released to our local schools to be used.
Michigan
That
GOP
has
blocked
to
them
change as well.
on purpose.
So those are some of the areas we're looking at. It gets down to really the brass tacks, the basic issues of how does a child read, and then how does he or she build that into an academic opportunity for the future that gives them every opportunity for expanding in this great country.
Call them state legislators. Push, push, push.
I have.
I'm a high school teacher, and I haven't heard a word from you out of there right now, how you're gonna support teachers. Last year was hell for me and my coworkers, hell. And I have a master's degree in special education, so I specialize in helping struggling students. It was absolute hell, but you know what? We are also being treated like we're not worth a whole lot. We don't make enough money, we don't get enough support, we have all these extra things, extra outside of school things put upon us. It doesn't work that way. Give us more support too, and we can give your children the support they need and the abilities they've fallen back on during this past year. I'd be more than happy to help a whole bunch of children come back to where they should have been, but I'm not gonna stress myself out over it. And all teachers were stressed way above a tolerable stress level this past year.
Well, I tell you what, I don't think you've ever heard me disregard or dishonor teachers.
I didn't hear you support teachers just now. You were only talking about the children.
Or the police, or the fire department, or.
I've always honored
Okay, fine.
teachers.
I'm speaking for my group.
I've
You can
honored
speak for yours.
educators. I've not honored the unions.
I'm a contracted teacher. I'm not even in the union.
I'm not necessarily talking of you. I'm telling you the truth. My concern was when there were people at the clerk's counters at Lowe's or Meijer or Walmart or all the other stores. When there were waitresses and waiters in restaurants that had at least a little bit of opening. When there were postal employees delivering their mail. There were unions pushing back against having teachers come back to the classroom in any type of form. I don't honor that. But the teachers whose classrooms I went to who were there here in Adrian, Lincoln School for instance, who said to me, I was so sick of not being in the classroom, I needed a kid fix. I want to be back with those students, that's my life. Those teachers have passion.
Okay.
Those teachers see this as a calling. Like my mother, like my daughter-in-law, like 3 aunts of mine who are school teachers. I honor that.
But you're a member of a party that undermines
I've
teachers.
supported for the IDA to make sure it's fully funded. That's a federal mandate that's unfunded. Let me finish the question
Okay,
that you
but I have
asked.
something to add.
I'll come back to you. Education is important. And we've lost education these last 2 years. And it's time for the teachers that really are committed, and I know a bunch of them, and see it as a calling, not a job, who have a passion to get back. It's going to be more sacrifice. It's going to be tough to bring these kids back up to where they should be, but we're Americans. We've got to do it if we're going to lead the world. I've supported funding for education. The dollars we sent, millions of dollars, back to states, including Michigan, that have not been used appropriately in the local classrooms. It frustrates me as well, and that's why I talk to legislators. As a citizen, and any power that I can give if it comes across, sure, what's wrong with that too? But they're not going to do it just because of that. We all need to be doing that. What this governor did, and what this legislature did, when you look at it in total, in disregard for some of these things, was criminal. It was wrong.
Saving lives.
So I support education.
Terribly criminal.
So,
Kids should have been back in school a long time ago. States all across the United States have had kids back in school with no problems. Why not Michigan? Yes?
first of all, I am still a teacher. I did not retire because I was born to be a teacher, and I'm one of the most compassionate and passionate
Good.
teachers you will ever
I
meet
applaud
in your
you.
entire lifetime.
Thank you.
However, I do not disagree with the governor. She did the right thing, and thankfully I made it through, and my children made it through without ever contracting COVID, and we are now all fully vaccinated. However, are you aware that Jackson School offers a $10,000 sign-on bonus because they can't get any teachers? I've worked in Jackson. I know why. I would not take the extra $10,000 to go back to Jackson because teachers aren't supported in Jackson. It's a good example of how lousy teachers are basically being treated in this country.
Other questions?
It's sad how Republicans have undermined support for teachers for these
Thank
years.
you for supporting the Great Lakes and taking care of them. And can you update us on what's going on with the Great Lakes as far as any new projects or anything that's in the works?
Well, as we move forward with the budget process, the appropriations process, we'll certainly join together with the Great Lakes legislators. It's a bipartisan group of us, and we've stood strongly together to make sure that the Great Lakes were cared for. In the last administration, for the first time, we got them to understand that the Great Lakes was a resource that we needed not only to keep the funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, but to expand it. Donald Trump signed legislation to expand it to $425 million beyond the $370 that had gone on for years. And in each of the cases of past presidents, this is a bipartisan problem, they didn't understand the Great Lakes and what it brought to this country. Very few people understand that 20% of the world's fresh water is housed in our Great Lakes. And the type of shipping, if we lose, for instance, we lose the key lock up at the Sioux, basically the only one that's using right now, 1,000-footer. If that goes down for one day, the next day we will have lost up to 16 million jobs in this country from all of the product, grain, ore, coal, etc. that comes through those locks that impacts manufacturing and much more across the nation. So we pushed on that, and in a strong bipartisan effort, we've achieved success, and I think we'll continue that. We've seen the Great Lakes enhanced in many ways. Finally, with the last administration, we got them to deal with the Asian carp issue. And the lock and dam issue is being settled to make sure that we don't have that invasive species get into the Great Lakes. First time. Barack Obama wouldn't do it because of Illinois interest. Pure and simple. Trump didn't have those problems. Didn't know about the issue until we began to talk with him about it, but he got it quick. You destroy the fisheries, you destroy the tourism of the Great Lakes, you don't get it back. So, we'll keep fighting on that. Other questions? Yes?
First of all, I want to thank you for voting yes to establish the federal Juneteenth holiday. You did vote yes on that.
He did. Let's round of applause.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And then I have a comment about it. Very, very recently, well, I'm just learning about Juneteenth, actually. I never knew much about that at all.
None of us did.
Okay.
I don't think that's true.
No,
You
no,
know,
no.
we in this room, but
I would say the majority of us didn't know about Juneteenth.
Okay.
I was never taught in school about Juneteenth.
Yeah, that would be an important thing to do. So real quick, this is a longer story, but I'll make it quicker. My father fought in the Second World War. When he came home, he was able to take advantage of the GI Bill. Lived in a little bitty house, but he had a house. He could send my sister and me to college. I had no debt at all. I just found out recently that the GI Bill that my father was eligible for wasn't equally eligible for black soldiers. That if they could get loans, they got higher interest loans, and they also were only allowed, you know, that redlining, they were only allowed to build in certain areas. My father had his pick of where he wanted to. And I think the fact that I could go to college debt-free is something that was the result of that program for him that other people didn't have. Another thing that I think we don't know about, how do we make our country more civically educated about our history, about the currents that lead to where we are today?
That's a concern that we all ought to have. And sadly, too often we're spending time on social engineering and not teaching about the history of our country, good, bad, or indifferent.
Social engineering?
How do you
Whatever do you mean?
The concern of American citizens is that for too long we have not taught history. We have not taught it in a way that understands that we are a union being perfected. We have our warts.
Like systemic racism?
We have no systemic racism in this
Yes, we
country
do.
anymore.
She just provided an example of it.
Yeah.
The GI Bill was not
And
equally available
the
to
bottom
people of
line
color.
is
That the Voting Rights Act of
the majority of people in
1957
this-
wasn't
this
passed
great
until
country
1957, and my
believe
dad's
that there's
74, he
one
would 10
race. That's
years
the American
would have been
race.
under that.
Yes, the American race.
And we all believe
Yes,
that.
yes.
But there are histories.
Let's go ahead and
for
pretend
instance,
like there isn't
Democrats
systemic
don't talk about
racism.
the fact that they were a party of the slaves. They were party of slaves.
Right, I understand you as a white man would like
They
us
were
to
the
not
party,
talk
they were
about
the
it.
party that supported the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, okay, fine.
We don't talk about the fact
swear.
that the Republican Party was the Emancipation Party.
Don't look at me like my...
Started in the
Not
7th
anymore.
District. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. He emancipated the slaves.
Only the slaves in southern states. not
He
the slaves
emancipated
in
the
North.
slaves.
Only those
Not
under
only
in
the ones
rebellion.
in southern
He
states.
emancipated the slaves,
In the
and
southern
ultimately,
states.
that's where the slaves were.
Currently under
Oh, there were
rebellion.
slaves in New York.
Maryland,
You're
Kentucky,
about
New
young
York.
During the slave period?
Yes.
You
There
grew
were
up, you grew
slave-
up in New York in the slave period?
Maryland, Kentucky were border states.
Okay, next question.
Their slaves weren't freed until the
question.
13th Amendment was passed.
I got another question.
Who had one here first, and then we'll go. Okay,
So we talked about your trip to Ukraine back in 2019, and you mentioned that you didn't participate in all of the things on the agenda for that trip, but the form that you filed with the ethics committee, you attested, I represent that I participate in each of the activities reflected in the attached sponsor's agenda. And you checked yes to that. And then up here it says willful or knowing misrepresentations of this form may be subject to criminal prosecution pursuant to 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. So why did you attest that you participated in all these items on the agenda when you did not, under penalty of wrongdoing?
I did participate in all of the items on the agenda, but not every single minute of that. I went to other things than were on that agenda.
Russian oligarchs.
No, I'm not going to do that. The ethics department has already looked at that.
How-
And you're
but you
trying to
told
bring
me
up
you
stuff that
participated
isn't
in all of
true.
them.
He's talking about a time when I went to the
To meet with
National
Russian-backed
Prayer Breakfast
oligarchs.
to speak at the National Prayer Breakfast in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Now that's sinister.
it is when you meet with Russian-backed
We were
oligarchs.
meeting in the Hall of Stalin, the former Hall of Stalin, where it used to have Stalin's statue in the middle of that hall. And there were 1,200
Can we
or
go back
more
to this?
people that were meeting
He's
to
got a
pray.
point. Can you stay on top?
And then I
of
had
this?
meetings with elected officials during that time. I had meetings with business leaders during that time. I had meeting with parliamentarians. And then I went out and spoke to another prayer breakfast out country.
And that wasn't on the agenda.
We added to the agenda as well. I fulfilled every purpose. You had a question?
Hang on a second.
No, I answered yours.
No, you didn't.
There's
I've
a
answered it
spot.
many
It's in-
times, that question.
Actually, you didn't, there's a spot.
I would suggest, if you have a concern, contact the Ethics Committee in Washington. And what did they do? Nothing.
Right.
Next
But you
question.
lied to them.
You guys
Like,
Next
they didn't know
question.
what you told them, and you
Next
lied.
question.
Can you talk to us about the wall down south, and what's going on?
Well, right now, the governor of Texas is going to be building the wall and asking other states to kick in, and they're
He should probably
thinking about
fix
doing
his
that.
energy infrastructure
The,
so they don't kill
Why
people
have
from
we
winter
all this
storms.
money set aside for the wall that our president is not spending on?
Because we don't believe in building the wall.
I didn't ask you, I asked him.
Well, I answered for him.
The,
He's
president, this
seven minutes on
new-
your
The
plate with
answer
the
for him.
answer.
Thank
this
you.
this is why we have problems with some of the teachers. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
yeah.
what they display to their students.
I
Yeah.
have an
Yeah.
idea. You probably don't.
No, the wall,
Not having teachers?
the wall was having a wonderful impact. I mean, we didn't hear about this incursion into our country for the past 2.5 years. Once the wall construction was going and the law was being followed. The law was being followed that's in place already.
Not being followed.
And
Asylum was not being
They had an
granted.
agreement with Mexico
Yeah,
to keep people in Mexico while they
Right.
waited for the hearings
yeah,
to come in. It worked.
yeah,
I was down there to see empty rooms that were once filled with thousands of people.
yeah. Heaven
That's
forbid,
redoubled its
heaven
issue
forbid we
now.
help people.
And we have people now that are coming into contact with human traffickers,
Yeah,
cartels.
yeah,
Let me pull something from my wallet here.
yeah.
This ought to be interesting.
It was a good deflecting technique. Just take this just like a whole minute.
You know, 'cause they are.
Boys are trafficked too,
Yeah.
but not 1 in 3 are sexually assaulted.
I'll still traffic. Really, I mean, really, you don't want boys to be trafficked.
No,
I
you
don't
don't.
either. I just wanted them included when he talked about it. That's
where is
it.
it?
Thank you.
Where did I put it?
That's all. I just wanted them included, so people don't think it's boys are okay, because they're not either.
I'm not going to waste any more time trying to find this big old wallet, but it's a packet of Equal. You know what Equal is? Sugar. Is it a little one?
No, it's not
In
sure.
that little packet, that size, if it were filled with fentanyl, which is coming across in overwhelming proportions now, and we had cut that down significantly, the opioid, fentanyl, heroin abuse issue in the state, that little packet would kill 500 people with the fentanyl contained in it. That's coming across the border. Huge quantities.
If you think
And those are
drugs
only
were slowed
quantities we've
down at
interdicted.
all during the Trump administration,
Mexico
you're a
is now
greater fool than I
producing
thought.
itself, with China involvement, fentanyl in Mexico to be transported across here. So all of that's going on. And we can talk about taking care of the least of these. We want to do that. But we ought to do it in an orderly fashion. We ought to know who they are, who's coming in.
Yeah, the
The
least are
numbers of
first.
people that have come from Yemen
Yeah.
already, and terrorist supporting countries that we've caught already, should scare us, let alone the ones we haven't caught.
What about the domestic terrorists that tried to overthrow the government of the United States? 400
Yes,
and
man,
counting.
I think
Your
we have time
guys,
for at least one more
definitely
question.
not Antifa.
I just, yes, sir. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm 77. I've voted in every election ever since I possibly could. And I've seen where people have been able to get together and have disagreements and yet go out afterwards. I've seen families being torn apart with politics lately. My own sister and brother-in-law and myself cannot bring up politics because we are so separated in our ideals. And so we discuss, you do your thing, you do mine. In Congress, I have never seen such polarization of you against me against you, and I think the whole country is dying for you all in Congress and the Senate to get together and not be enemies and talk to each other. Do you talk to Democrats in the Congress? Do you have one person as a friend you can say that the Democrats, so that I have some faith that we are going to be able to work together. We want to listen to each other, and we may never agree, but at least listen to each other and get some form of compromise, just like in a marriage. You compromise. Will we ever see that again in our country? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. I would encourage you as well to think about all the shouting that went on here. You were involved with it.
Yeah.
Betrayal of one's oath puts that marriage
So
at risk.
let me answer her question.
He's right.
I think the majority of people that are here today will go home with a tight gut from the shouting that went on and the disrespect. Questions that could have been asked and answered without the shouting. Now let me encourage you. What you see on Fox or CNN isn't what actually is happening in the halls of Congress. And I wish I could invite you as my guest to come and spend a day with me in the Capitol, in the office buildings, any place that I could bring someone from the public in to sit in the gallery. But I can't because Nancy Pelosi still has it ringed about with a fence.
Because of the attempted
we don't
coup.
have families that are coming in.
That's why
We
I'm
don't have
yelling.
groups that
Because
are
of the
coming in.
attempted coup and trying to
So,
overthrow
if
my
you could
government.
if you could see what's going on the floor of the House, there's a lot of love and respect that goes in a bipartisan fashion. I have many Democrat friends. I just told you of 2 bills that I've co-sponsored with Democrats or they have co-sponsored with me. Not only am I still rated the #1 most conservative member of the Michigan delegation by the American Conservative Union, the Lugar Center, which is not anything but at least a moderate center, rated me as the most bipartisan, effective legislator of the Michigan delegation.
Thank you,
Why?
Koch
Because of my
brothers.
bipartisan
Koch brother
efforts.
money.
Now, we meet every Thursday morning in a bipartisan prayer breakfast, every Thursday morning. This prayer breakfast has gone on for almost 80 years. And yesterday it met again. I'm the co-chairman with my good friend from Pennsylvania, Democrat, Congressman Connor Lamb. We share that chairmanship for this term. And Haley Stevens from Michigan gave her faith walk testimony yesterday in front of all of us. That goes on. This week, Gary Peters' mother died, 96-year-old lady. You ought to read her story. It's an unbelievable story. Wonderful lady. You can't believe the outpouring of sympathy to Gary. And the texts and emails are going on. The only ones that you're seeing in the public eye that are fighting aggressively between Democrats and Republicans are primarily in the leadership ranks, or certain small groups, like the Democrat side, the Squad, and the other side, the Freedom Caucus. That's where you'll see the animosity.
The sedition.
Otherwise,
caucus.
it's not there, and I'm going to continue to be part of that group that gets together and works together, and we're going to do it. That is the time. We could have had more answers,
Yeah,
and I hope the next time that you all come, we'll have people that understand that we are American citizens with equal opportunity for our beliefs, our policy, values, and all of the rest, but we need to respect each other.
I have no respect for somebody that attempted
Thank
a
you for
coup
being here.
and tried to overthrow the government of the United States. Lying, oath-breaking traitors deserve disrespect. They should face consequences and they should face accountability.
You should have some respect.
I don't
I don't
any
respect you
for them.
either.
That's
because
fine, fine. I don't care.